Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the next episode of the Mint Mob Podcast. Jason here, joined by my buddy Alex across the pond in Germany. We're going to dive into the usual stuff, talk markets, and a little bit of collecting psychology today, I think. Alex, how you doing, buddy? Let's check in with you.
Hey man, I'm doing great. Great to be here again. Great to be speaking about so many interesting topics, right? You mentioned it shortly or briefly that we often talk about discipline, routines, resilience on the founder side of NFT projects or even projects in general, but much less about what's demanded from collectors. And we want to spotlight that a little bit today. But before we do all that, we will, as always, jump a little bit into crypto and see what happened in the past week. If anything happened, we are not sure, right? Like we have seen 2 weeks of, or not even 2 weeks, like probably 2 months of sideways movement right now. I saw one big news that I read today, which was about Jerome Powell. I'm not sure if you saw that, but he seems to be under DOJ, Department of Justice, criminal investigation. And Powell Powell jumped in and said that this is most likely a part of political pressure to force interest rate cuts. I'm not sure if that ever happened in the United States, but I'm sure you can tell me.
Well, I caught a little bit of the headline and, I started to watch Powell's speech, or at least a video of Powell's speech, or maybe a clip from it. But to be honest with you, when he started talking about like political retaliation, I just tuned out immediately. I'm so sick of these guys blaming each other and all their problems on somebody else and this, party or that party or this activity or that activity. I mean, the truth is, like, if there's anything above board that's going on in government, we should allow it to continue. If there's anything below board or, happening behind closed doors or anything that looks fishy, then that should be investigated and ended. And the truth is there's just a ton of corruption in government and a ton of government spending going to strange places, which apparently is what this is related to. But when he started talking about that, I just tuned out immediately. I didn't care. So apparently he's being investigated because of something that he put money into. And, at the end of the day, the truth will come out. Like all we know right now is that there's been some sort of accusation made or at least some sort of inquiry formed and that he's acknowledged it publicly and he's called it, basically some sort of political retaliation. And aside from that, no one knows anything. So you can read anything you want to read, but until the facts are released, we won't know anything.
Isn't it crazy that he's like such an important person to like for everything that happens in the markets, right? Like people are now kind of worried about, very low chances of aggressive rate cuts in early 2026. And like if you look at Powell, if you look at like the announcements he makes, especially regarding rate cuts, and even like the speech he usually makes after that, it's like so important to people trying to trade the markets. Like even like whether he starts his speech with good afternoon or not, right? Like it's like how can someone have such a big impact on the markets? And do you feel like this is something that should change?
Well, I mean, I'm not a central bank guy. I'm in the camp of we shouldn't have central banks. And so, the question you're really asking is about central banking. It's not Jerome Powell specifically. He's the Fed chair right now. But, pick a Fed chair, from Bernanke on the way through to, Powell today. But at the end of the day, the central bank controls interest rates, which controls the liquidity of money, or I should say the ease with which a borrowing market can exist. Because basically, if they lift interest rates to the point where it's very costly for business to borrow money and to reinvest capital, I mean, so much of business is done through loans and through like balancing your interest rate as part of a fixed cost to the project that you're working on and the business that you're building. And so if interest rates are high, it cuts into your profits. It makes the business more risky. It makes anything that you're borrowing against a little bit more, let me think about it for a second, make sure that I have enough margin here that this makes sense. When rates are lower, then basically you're buying money at a cheaper cost, which means that your profit margin can be a little bit larger. You have a little bit more room to make mistakes. You have a little bit more room to move. And so we call that the easy money times. And that's when business is really borrowing more money and putting more money to work normally. But they're putting the money to work in some productive fashion, whether it's reinvestment or even buying assets for the business. So, a lot of this stuff is financed, and when the interest rates are lower, again, it's much less of a burden on business. So money tends to be freer. It tends to flow more regularly through the marketplace, as opposed to when rates are higher. So am I a fan of the central bank controlling that? Absolutely not. Like the central bank should have no say in interest rates whatsoever. The market can decide what it wants to pay for money, which is what we do every day in the private money sphere, right? So if I go and I want to buy a property and I need to borrow money to buy that property, if I go to a hard money lender or basically like a cash lender, someone who has the cash, it's not a bank, but they're lending professionally. We call these hard money lenders. If I go to someone like that, they may say, I'm going to charge you 12%. Or I'm going to charge you 10%, right? And then I could go to the next guy who says, well, I'll give you 9.5%. And then I'll go to the next guy who says, well, you've done business with me for a long time. I'll give you 8% on this particular deal, but my normal rate is 10, right? You can negotiate rates, but when they're set at the federal level, it's not the federal level because the Federal Reserve is not a government entity. Just FYI, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But when they're set at the federal level, they filter down into the member banks. And so all of your, national banks are members of the Federal Reserve System, and they all take their cues from the Federal Reserve. So if you're not savvy in borrowing money in the private market, it limits the amount of transactions you're going to do in the home market, in the business market, in CapEx, and all of the other expenditures that you could accumulate. So it definitely has an impact. And that's why people pay attention when these guys speak, because they want to know, all right, well, am I going to get hung out to dry if I borrow money at this rate? Or should I wait 3 months or 6 weeks and borrow it at a lower rate? That's basically what's happening.
Yeah, that perfectly makes sense. But what do you think? I mean, it did not really have a huge impact, at least this time when Powell spoke on the crypto markets. And as I mentioned in the beginning, like crypto markets haven't really moved for eight weeks now. What does it do psychology-wise? I mean, if you look at people like, let's say, you and I, who try to accumulate as many Bitcoins as possible, like spot Bitcoins, of course, like does your investment strategy change in times like these? Like, is it easier for you to invest when you see a dip, or is it like whenever I have money left, I just try to acquire Bitcoin, because that's what I try to do?
Well, I'm always trying to acquire more Bitcoin for sure. I mean, there's no question in my mind that Bitcoin is the value preservation asset. And I don't care what anyone says at this point. The adoption curves are there for Bitcoin as a treasury asset on many large companies now, outside of MicroStrategy, or Strategy, I should say. So I'm not worried about Bitcoin per se. So yeah, I'll buy it at pretty much any price because I'm just trying to accumulate sats. And, let that ride over time, because I'm not a trader. If I'm a trader, it's a different thing, right? But yeah, if you are doing an investment play where you want to borrow money and make money in the arbitrage, I mean, meaning, like, for example, let's say you could borrow $100,000 from your local bank at 3%, right? Well, this was completely a possibility a few years back, like previous to COVID, or actually during COVID, you could borrow money at 3% or even less, which is historically unheard of, like extremely low rates. I mean, it's basically free money when you factor in inflation. So you could borrow money at that low rate and buy a home, for example, or you could borrow money at that low rate if you had a relationship with a lender, and then reinvest that money into your business or to an investment that would produce a higher rate. Let's say you were able to invest in something that was going to produce an 8, 9, or 10% return, right? And then basically you could make money off the arbitrage. So if you're paying 3%, but your investment's paying you 8%, then you're basically making 5% on your money, kind of a thing. So it does encourage those types of activities. And, if you're savvy with money, a lot of times people will take advantage of this. It's just, you don't want to do it in a situation where rates can change quickly, because that might change your returns quickly. And a lot of times these loans are not something you can get in and out of very fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, um, I think last time we spoke about metals that recently pumped pretty hard. Did you already like consider? I think you mentioned that you sold some silver. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So would you like, especially now where it feels like metals are peaking, would you recommend, or obviously no recommendations here, but would you for yourself, like would you make that decision to put everything onto Bitcoin, or would you never be like that type of guy who says, okay, I'll put everything on, on one asset?
I'm never going to be the guy who throws, his chips to the middle of the table on any one specific play. And I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of reasons for that, but at the end of the day, for me, I don't sleep well if I have to, watchdog something. So for me, I'm always in what I feel like are the top 3 to 5 plays, and realizing that diversification is not holding multiple assets in the same market. It's holding different markets basically. So I have some
Yeah.
money in real estate. I have some money in precious metals. I have some money in crypto. I have some money in, like different places. So that if something happens in the crypto market, well, probably my real estate portfolio isn't going to be impacted by that. So I'm okay there. Or if something happens in the real estate market, probably not going to impact my crypto portfolio, or if it does, it might be minor, right? So diversification is being in different markets, not necessarily holding, different stocks in the stock market. You're still in the stock market. Stock market's going to move the way it moves, and your likelihood of being impacted because you're holding something that's moving is going to be, there. It's a high likelihood of that, whether it's positive or negative. So yeah, definitely want to spread the love when it comes to the assets. But again, like across markets, not items within markets, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, diversify your portfolio. Not everything should be in crypto and multiple crypto coins. I'm trying to. I mean, I feel like the entry to get into real estate is a lot higher, like the barrier, obviously, because you cannot just afford to buy, I don't know, a house without, obviously taking a huge loan. Unfortunately, I feel like the real estate market is kind of, I mean, I can only speak for where I live, of course, but it's like, I feel like the good times are over, like, especially for buying, right? I think you guys are in a much better position when it comes to, buying properties. And I mean, what stops me from buying in the United States, right?
Yeah, what stops you from buying in the U.S.? Exactly. I mean, the thing about property is it obviously it's expensive right now for a lot of people.
Mhm.
I mean, the average incomes haven't risen much, but the average cost of most valuable assets has. I mean, you mentioned silver, like
Mhm.
gold and silver is a classic example. Silver was what, $30 an ounce, or 20, in the mid 20s, just last year, like as early as like early summer, for example. So it almost tripled over the last few months. So would I buy silver now? No, I wouldn't, because it's making new highs. You should never buy anything that's just making new highs. But at the end of the day, you still wouldn't do long. You still wouldn't do bad if your investment thesis is inflation, because they're going to continue to print money, and you can hold silver for the rest of your life. You're going to be fine. But if your time horizon is tomorrow, again, not a good idea to buy those types of things right now.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, like if your time horizon is tomorrow, well, like what is like that's gambling, right? Like if I feel like I'll buy ADA because I feel like it's going to make 5x in the next few months, like this is most likely not going to happen. So I feel like when it comes to investing, you should invest into something that you feel like that you're confident that is going to, rise and increase in its value. And like I feel like for me in the end it's only going to be like Bitcoin and Solana on crypto, and then real estate, and then I'll invest in a lot of big stocks and stuff like that. I've been doing that for quite some time. But yeah, let's jump a little bit into the world of NFTs, and we kind of teased that in the very beginning. Like, we often speak about discipline and psychology of being a founder in an NFT project, but we haven't really, or we kind of do not pay too much attention to what it demands from a collector to be collecting NFTs, right? Like, there are actually so many people out there, especially in our project, who keep showing up every day, who keep showing up for every single mint, who spread the word on X, who always try to, like, even bring in or connect people within the space. And in a way, being an active collector is almost a job, right? It's unpaid, but still, very emotionally and almost socially demanding, right? Like, if some people do not show up for a week, they come back and they feel like they need to apologize because they've been away, like. And yeah, what do you think? Like, is being a collector a job?
It can be, yeah, for sure. But it's one of those things. If you got the bug, man, you got the bug, and you have to, you have to satisfy that need, right? So, I mean, coming from, like being a little kid in the '80s, coming up with all those like early cartoons that promoted products, which I think they made illegal eventually, but like your G.I. Joe cartoons, I can't even remember them all. There's so many, like Thundercats and He-Man and all of those things that were popular when I was a little kid. Like all of those different things were part of the culture that you were experiencing as a child. And, when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of resources in most cases. And, there was always that one kid in the neighborhood who had, like whose dad was a doctor or something and always had a lot of money, and always had anything that he wanted. So you'd go and hang out with that kid and, play with his cool stuff that you couldn't afford, right? But then when you get older and you have a little bit of disposable cash, collecting is kind of a way of buying back some of those memories from childhood or those things that you sort of missed. And we all do this in myriad psychological ways, but it manifests itself in collecting as a very, very obvious one. It's like, well, I didn't have this as a child, or I didn't have the ability to experience this as a child, so I want to experience it now, right? But we do the same thing with relationships, and we do the same thing with mindsets. When you learn better, you do better. When you earn more, you're able to go out and spend more on some things that you might have wanted to acquire earlier. And it's one of those things that's like a through line for humanity. We always want to fill in the gaps where we feel like we've missed something. So a huge driver in collecting is just wanting to fill those gaps. But then once you've filled those gaps, it's like, okay, well, this is kind of like a disease because it's so much fun to fill the gaps. Like the search for something beautiful or something unique or something that you wanted but couldn't have, or want or have now that someone else can't have. Like all of these different psychological triggers are powerful, and they create like longing, they create nostalgia, they create a sense of status, they create a sense of accomplishment. When you're in the marketplace, take NFTs, for example, if there's an NFT that you want and someone buys it and you're not able to hold it, okay, well now it's like, it's on, like if you really want that, well, how can I get it from this person? Well, can I negotiate with them? Will they let me pay them a little bit more? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to make sure that I can acquire this piece? And I recently did this with one of Muna Luna's pieces. And it was just one that spoke to me, and someone else bought it and I wasn't able to grab it. And so I reached out to that person and threw an offer at them, and they ended up accepting the offer, and now I have it. And I jumped through all these hoops to satisfy the need that I initially had when I saw the piece because of the emotions that it evoked in me. And all of these things play a role in what you want to acquire and what you go after. But all of that psychology is powerful stuff. And so in many, many ways, like you could call, collecting things a profession, you could call it a disease, you could call it an addiction, you could call it all of these different things. But at the end of the day, you're satisfying some internal desire, or some sort of feeling that you get when you do these things. And you're not able to do that in some other area of your life. So There's so many different little psychological tentacles that you could touch on with this. Like, you could literally talk about this for hours, but at its most basic sense, it's just filling some sort of need that you've acquired, either because of a desire that you missed or something that you see as a desire that you now, have or want.
Would you say that collecting NFTs or digital collectibles is different, like especially when they are art related? It is different to collecting traditional paintings that you actually hang up your wall. I mean, obviously, some people have thousands of pieces in their wallets, and they won't ever be able to, print them all out and put them on their walls. So, do you think there is a difference between these types of collecting?
There are differences, yeah, but I think it has to do more with the way that the technology has evolved than the psychology. And, we're touching on this right now in Goodfellas, for example, with showing, bosses, for example, anyone holding the boss rank, how to, set up and create your very own collection space. Like, it's not going through a third party, it's yours. And once it's in yours, you can do with it whatever you want, right? This mirrors the real world. If I went into an art gallery, or I went to a comic book signing where my favorite artist was, giving me prints or signing prints or whatever, I would take that home and I would put it into my collection somehow, some way. Maybe it's in my safe, maybe it's on my wall, or maybe it's just in a stack of, beautiful images that I haven't done anything with. But the point is, it's with me at all points in time. And the NFT market has not been able to mirror that in large part because of the complexities of simply creating an NFT on chain. There's just a lot of convoluted, information that the average person isn't going to sit down and sift and sort through to try to figure out, right? So if we can provide this service, then we can make it more like what you would have in the real world, more like a trading card situation where if you swap with your buddy, it's with you at all times in your digital space, in this case, maybe not a physical space, but in your digital space, and you own and control that, right? And that's really what you want to have happen. So it can mirror it to a very, very high degree. And then when you throw in, some of the tools like the one that Lucia has used to hang her pieces in a virtual gallery, like these are the types of tools that you can use to make it feel like it's real and with you at all times. But the ownership piece underpins all that. So as long as you are collecting and holding it in your own space in a collection that you own and control, then it feels very similar to the real world. Because if I have a painting in my living room, I own and control it. Just like if I have an NFT in my Solana collection, for example, I own and control that. And that's really the thing that we want to mimic with these collections and teaching people how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I love the idea of being able to create your own gallery on, on your chain, on the chain you want to, possess and own stuff. Would you agree, like, that NFT collectors who went through, the big hype in 2021 have never really been collectors, in that sense? They've rather been, like, I don't know, gamblers, investors, because, like, if you look at collectors nowadays, I mean, we are in touch with so many artists, right? And you see them providing art, and people buy that art and they want to own it, but they never really wonder, like, okay, will that artist stay, or will that project stay, or will whatever project underperform, or do I need to believe in a project? Like, right, like, if someone owns a piece from us or from the artist incubator, they still own that piece regardless of us quitting. It's never going to happen, don't worry, guys. But even if we quit, right, these people still own the art. So what do you think is the importance of a project still, like, looking at how people collect pieces nowadays? Like, it's actually more about the art and what they buy and collect and own, and less about the project. Would you agree or not?
I disagree, actually. The project is everything right now, and it's going to continue to be so, because the project is what kind of sets the tone for the values and the principles of the collectors that are there. So even if you removed all the technology, you're left with a group of people who came and assembled themselves because they have like values. So that's like the primary goal of a project. Even then, like even during all the degen nonsense, that was the primary goal. It's just most people ignored it. And so today, what's happening right now is, again, flight to quality, which we've talked about. More and more people are understanding, how the market works, but also how collecting can be or can be seen in the context of NFTs. So if I have let's say I have a piece from a collection, the collection or the founders of that collection still have an obligation to deliver value in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in the form of new artwork or whether it's in the form of new utility or new connections. So the IP, for example, in our project, one of the things that we guarantee is the IP. Without our project doing that, our holders couldn't have the IP. So this is one of the, core tenets of like Goodfellas, for example, is that we get paperwork on all of our pieces. So the paperwork is there, the chain of custody in terms of IP ownership is there, and our collectors truly do own those images and those likenesses, by document. Like it's not something that we've just talked about. It's something that's actually been done and is being done actively all the time. So there's that. And then when you factor in the fact that the collection itself can't be a collection outside of people coming together and deciding we're going to put a bunch of pieces together under one umbrella, then you would just end up with like a hodgepodge of different random pieces scattered across the marketplaces, and the marketplaces wouldn't know what to do with them. So in the past, before Core, NFTs on Solana, for example, when you would submit a collection to, say, Magic Eden, for example, they required that you submitted a list of hashes. In other words, a list of all the NFT addresses. And you could sort of make up that list of hashes and they would publish them as you submitted. And in that format, you could sort of add and remove hashes over time if you needed to. But with the new Core format, when you drop an NFT into a collection, it automatically stays in that collection. So with Goodfellas, like let's say you pick up another OG piece, that OG piece is automatically minted into the original collection, and that collection exists as an extension of the project, which holds IP. So everything under that umbrella is covered. Does that make sense? And then everything under that umbrella being covered means that you have peace of mind in terms of ownership, IP, and of course, markets and marketplaces. So it just consolidates everything. Now, from a strict collecting artwork perspective, you don't need a project at all. Like if you just want to grab one-off pieces, you don't need a project at all. You just need the ability to acquire pieces. And this is the problem that's created with real collectors when they want to actually view their pieces. Because some artists are on Tezos, and some artists are on Solana, and some are on Ethereum, and some are on Polygon, and some are on here and there and the other place. It's all over the place. So this is why a collector needs his or her own collection so that they can bring that artwork under the umbrella and view it in one simple place within their wallet. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can look at it. But in terms of like what's necessary is determined by what people want. And right now, I think what most collectors want is a better collector experience. And that's going to come from projects like ours who are actively seeking to create that, and then actively educating people on how they can make their life easier in the marketplace.
I feel like the solution we are aiming to build is actually such a great thing, and it feels like, the like, do you feel like if you look across the marketplaces and all the people collecting art from, I don't know, Tezos or different artists, do you feel like these guys felt the need to have, like, I feel like sometimes I feel like we need to educate people why it's necessary to have your own collection or why it's better for you, right? And I felt like, or for a very long time, I felt like collectors just collected to collect, right? Like, I want that in my wallet. I got that. I'm happy. And I feel like now that they know that they should own IP and that they should have everything under, their umbrella and under their control and their own collection, I feel like this is something that could actually change the space in some way, right? And I feel like it's been some kind of surprise that people haven't thought about that before, and I'm not sure why. It's probably the reason is probably because we're early, right?
Uh, I mean, I'm not really sure what the reason might be. I mean, obviously there's a long way to go, but maybe you could tell me what's your opinion on that.
Well, yeah, like I said, I feel like people haven't felt that need yet because right now there has never been a big issue with chains, right? Like imagine Tezos goes broke tomorrow, never nobody knows what's going to happen, and suddenly all the art vanishes and I don't know, is not available anymore. That's like when people will realize, okay, there was always that need of having everything under my control on the chain that I believe will survive forever. And this hasn't happened yet, but that might be happening in the future. I mean, there are so many different chains with like art on it, but we spoke so many times about people or projects quitting, and that this is most likely going to keep happening in the future. So I feel like we are kind of doing some sort of prevention for that, with the type of galleries we want to build, and we want to provide the possibility for everyone to build his own gallery. So this is of course good, but one thing I wanted to touch on when you spoke about the values and the communities we need is that I remembered Mark, and shout outs to you, man. I know you're probably listening. He has one sentence in his biography that I keep keep quoting recently. He says that he came for the art but stayed for the community, and I feel like when you read these kind of sentences, do you feel like there is some sort of, let's say, unspoken expectation that real collectors must always be present, coming from projects, or do you feel um, like people can like I said, because like when people vanish for some time and they're on vacation, they're sick or whatever, and they come back, they apologize. Do you feel there is that kind of invisible expectation of like, hey, you need to be here. Where are you? Like, we need you.
Not really. I think that founders like to project that onto people because, most people, I think, that call themselves founders just want you to show up when they want to take from you. It's like, hey, we're doing something and we want you to show up and give us your time, or we want you to give us your money, or we want you to give us your tokens. Give, right? And there's very little in the way of returns. And so for me, I don't ever want a collector in our family to feel that way. If they need to disappear and take care of some family stuff or personal stuff, then hey, cool, all for it. Make sure that you take care of your life, make sure that you take care of yourself. And in fact, I send DMs to people I haven't seen or heard from in a while fairly often, and especially the really active ones. And sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. They're like, hey, I've got this going on, I got that going on. I'm like, cool, hey, I'm here if you need to talk to somebody, or I'm here if you need to bounce some ideas off someone. I'm not like, oh, you need to show up for the mint. like how selfish would that be, right? Like that's the way most people are. It's like, no, if you've got stuff going on in your life, go take care of it. It's not your job to manage the project. Like I got it. Me and Alex can handle it. It's not a big deal. So, do what you have to do, take care of yourself. And part of being truly community oriented is understanding that people are going to come and go, or people are going to pop in and pop out. That's just part of it. That's life. Not everyone is super consistent. In fact, very few people are. So when you have those people who are super consistent, that's, you really want to acknowledge their energy and effort. And the people who can't, maybe they're that way for a specific reason that they can't share or don't want to share publicly. And so there's no judgment. It's just like, hey, if you need me, I'm here. Aside from that, hey, just pop by, say hello if you need anything, and let me know,
Yeah, I mean, like when I thought about that, I felt like I was trying to think about how I felt back then when I like, and when I say back then, I mean like what 2 or 3 years ago, before we had that project, and when I was like the average guy trying to, mint an NFT here and there where I felt like the art is cool. But I remember that when I minted a piece from a project, I think I did feel some sort of like, okay, if I mint that particular piece, I kind of need to commit to the project, right? Like I want to be part of it. I want to be part of the community. I want to get in touch and connect to people, and like I want to be around, right? And I mean, you mentioned it in the very, like you mentioned it when you just spoke, actually, like when you said that we never ever put pressure on people. Of course, like there are more important things, far more important things than being online and being available on Web3. Um, but I just wondered whether or how collectors feel, and if it still feels, the way that I felt back then. Because I'm not sure why I felt like this. Because when I try to remember the time, I felt like back then it was a lot more about, especially when you minted generative art, it was about how is like the floor price going to be. Like that's like the major discussion or conversation in whatever Discord you were. And when you committed to a project, it felt like, okay, like I'm probably going to be thrown into some sort of Discord server where everyone is going to be like, okay, when staking, when I don't know, when pump, when whatever. Like it was always about the price, right? It was less about the art. And that obviously changed nowadays. And that's why I wanted to find out whether the approach, or yeah, like when collectors get into a new project, when what they feel like, this is actually something like we should, or I could speak to one of them as well, right? Like what do you feel like when you mint a new project? Like is it like just like an art piece? Like that's actually one thing I wanted to speak to you about, right? Like when we had Seven Dawns recently, you remember that there was one of the artists who kind of leaked their art piece before, not going to mention the name, but it happened because she didn't know. And then we told her, and we were like, hey, we usually mint pieces and keep the art a surprise, right? But then when Seven Dawns passed, I was like, okay, like usually when you look at these when you look at these artists and their collectors, these collectors are actually used to mint something they already know, right? Like it's not that they get surprised by a mint. That's only happening in our project. So I felt like if we want to attract their collectors, is that even the right way, right? Like because let's say we have like a Muna Luna's piece, like when she, like all of them, right? Like when they create art, they publish it on their socials, and when people like it, they buy it, right? So it's a different kind of like approach when you buy a piece compared to what we do, right? So would you ever consider like showing the art before we mint it, especially on these seriouses? I'm not sure. Like we probably need to get collectors' ideas, but I love the way we do it for some reason. Like I love that surprise thing, and I wouldn't change it. But what do you think?
No, the thing when it comes to artwork, or let me rephrase it, it's not just artwork, it's any work. So the first time that you show your work is the only time that you get the chance to make a first impression. And the mistake I see so many artists making is giving away their work when they want it to be minted. Now, if you are an individual artist and the only way that you can drive traffic to a mint page is to create the mint first and to say, here's the piece, who wants to buy it? That's a different story altogether. But if you're in the context of a project where you are minting pieces and your goal there is to wow your collectors and to create beautiful things that are going to surprise them, then everything you give away takes away from their experience. And as much as we'd like to say, oh, I want to see it beforehand, the truth is, like, once you've seen it, you've seen it. You can't unsee it. So you only get that special feeling once. And for me, like if I'm minting the way that we do new artwork in amounts of 21s or in batches of 100, I want people to be surprised and have that experience together, especially when we're doing it live in spaces or live on Discord. It's a community thing. It's a communal feeling to do that with people. Now, I mean, obviously that's just the way that I think about it, but I'm also thinking about it from a marketing perspective. And if you give away an idea, and in the course of artwork, all artwork is an idea in some way, shape, or form, then you can never make it more powerful than the first time it's seen. So think about the first time you watched Stranger Things, right? It's like, oh wow, this is really, really cool. The second time you watch it, you already know what to expect. You already know the feel. You already know the 80s vibe. You already know all these things, so it's less impactful. And it's the same on quotes, literature, art, cars, motorcycles, like all of the things that come from the mind of a human. Once they're seen or understood, they will never have the same impact. So what a lot of artists will do is they will take that away from the collector by giving them too much up front. Now, in our project, we don't do that because we mint in groups of pieces. But again, if I am an individual artist, unless I'm good at marketing and I know how to do reveals, it's probably not going to have the same amount of power. So there's two different perspectives and two different pathways to this particular question.
When I think about it, and I remember the Seven Dawns event, I totally I think that was like the first time I really understood the power of surprise, right? Like you collected all the pieces, you had the pieces from these different artists, and I remember us being on Spaces and kind of speaking with artists about the pieces, and I have not seen them before, and that made it even more like exciting for me. Like I really wanted to see them, and I really looked forward to see them, and I kind of annoyed you to send them over so I could see them. So the surprise part is actually so good that I probably never wanting to get rid of it. So I see what you mean. I just felt like they're collectors, especially like the artists we collaborate with. They're used to see the art before, right? So it's maybe a little more difficult to attract them to a project where things are handled differently, right? So that was basically the perspective where I was seeing it from.
Yeah, of course. I mean, humans hate change. As much as we like to talk about, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change it. I mean, the fact that so many people don't do it is just proof that, it's uncommon for humans to change. And so when you start throwing, ideas that people aren't necessarily accustomed to, and in the NFT world, we've overcome many, many, many sorts of, I guess you'd say, traditional ways of doing things or cultural ways of doing things, from trying to, throw 10,000 pieces at the wall to see what would stick, to, every interaction is GM instead of having some substance behind it, right? Like all of these different cultural things exist, and people engage in them to whatever degree they believe that they're valid. So when you start introducing new ways of thinking, all of these ideas and identities that people have attached themselves become a challenge, or they become challenged. And now you're asking people to take a look at who they are. And then that's a really difficult place for people to stay and hang out and say, well, do I really want to change this? No, I'm accustomed to doing it this way. And then how will I feel if I don't do it this way, right? There's all these fears and doubts. And so going your own way is really a renegade type of activity. It's a rebellious activity. You're going against the norm. You're going against what people expect. And so it requires a lot of time, attention, and explanation to get people there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd actually love to see that. For example, if Maria went ahead and she were like, instead of, dropping the muses and be like, hey, we got 1, 2, 3, and you can reserve one and the other ones are for auction or whatever. Like if she went and said like, here today, another muse, surprise one. It's like you won't see it until you mint it. That would be actually so much more fun, right?
Probably, yeah. I would say so.
But like Maria is one of the artists who managed to get, like, obviously she has like that project with the woman from Cosmos and all that. So she managed to build a community that really loves her art. But I feel like if you look at artists like Sophie Ugly or Julia, like they don't really have die-hard fans yet, right? Like if they made some sort of surprise mint. I mean, I feel like when they drop a piece and people buy it, it's more of like they they like accidentally come across it on their timelines. They like it and they just buy it for $5, right? So I'm not sure if that kind of approach would work for them if they made like surprise mints and be like, hey, we drew a piece, or I created a piece and you won't see it until you mint it. Because I feel like it definitely needs some sort of community building before.
Yeah, of course. I mean, people buy from those they know, love, and trust. And, you know, at the end of the day, Maria is a classic example. She spent a lot of time investing in her people and in her community. And it shows, you know, it really shows. She's done a great job of taking care of people. And of course, she's had her ups and downs like most people here. And she's, you know, she's still here doing the work. And this is the thing, like you continue to have to do the work, you know, a lot of times when results aren't there, when they're not evident, you know, you have to have faith in what you're doing, and that, you know, ultimately you can come through the other side and provide value to people, and, you know, capture the attention and the eyeballs of those who care about what you're doing. And if you can't do that, of course, it's very frustrating, and it happens very, very slowly. So some of the newer artists, or artists who aren't as, you know, out there in terms of how they're pushing their artwork or marketing themselves, they're going to have a much tougher time developing an audience. And, you know, it could have a lot to do with, you know, language or location, right? So if you can't speak the language, it's hard to plug into spaces. Or if you can't speak the language, it's hard to write and know that what you're communicating is actually coming across in another language, because you're relying on a translator. You know, so all of these different things might play a role, but none of it will, you know, advance you faster than just being consistent and really telling people who you are and what you're about, and the story about what you want to create. That's what's going to draw people in. And, you know, like committing to that process is it's a real task. It's a real chore. And it's the thing that so many people in the creative space don't want to do, because it is so tasky. It's not like sit down and create, have fun. It's sit down, let me do the boring admin stuff, and then, you know, maybe hopefully I have time left over to do what I really enjoy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you and I, we can say that we have worked with so many multiple or different artists, and, you know, the work ethic, you know, among them was so different. Like some were on such a great level, doing such a great job, and some were like, take my art, sell it, and I'll never want to hear from you again. like it's actually like it's interesting, right? You can see from a conversation who's most likely going to be successful and who is not. But yeah, what
Yeah, for
can
sure.
we do about it, right?
Well, I mean,
So let's, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I was going to give you an example. There's a really cool artist that I bought work from. Let me see if I can remember his name. He does the glitchy stuff. Oh yeah. His handle on X is Kung Fu Have Style. And his work is absolutely fantastic. He does a really great job. And so I reached out. He was, you know, he had posted some of his work, and I reached out and I was like, hey, I want to buy some of your work. I want to be able to put it in my own gallery. And so we had that conversation, and he's like, yeah, no worries. So I ended up buying some work from him, and, you know, we're communicating via DM back and forth. And, you know, he had followed me, so I had followed him, so we were able to communicate. And then so I pick up a couple pieces, and then I send him a message, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, your message can't go through. And I'm like, oh, well, shit, what's going on here? So, you know, I poke around, it's like, oh, well, he unfollowed me, so now I can't message him, right? And so I look at his follower count. His follower count's like 20,000 maybe, something like that. Mine's like, you know, 1,000, just under 1,000. And so what he was doing basically was like follower farming, right? It doesn't mean his work isn't good. Like, his work is really good, and I'm happy that I own it. So I have no regrets that I bought it. But in terms of building relationships, when you look at someone who has a mission of acquiring followers, he's not going to acquire buyers. So now the next time he posts something, I'm less likely to buy from him, because he basically he basically committed a sin in the eyes of X, right? Like he did the thing where it's like, okay, well, I kind of want a relationship, but I'm not really sure. And then when you look at his follower accounts, it's like, oh, well, he has 20,000 followers, but he's following like, I don't know, 2 or whatever it is, 1,000 something, right? It's some really small number. So it's obvious that he's like follower farming. But then he goes on his timeline, he complains that nobody's buying his stuff. I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe you should invest more in the relationships, because I would have been happy to buy more of your stuff because it's fucking amazing. But if you're follower farming, I'm not interested. I won't be buying more from you, right? And so I've seen people do all kinds of these little games where they play the follower count game like it matters. It doesn't matter your followers, it matters your engagement. If you have 100 people who engage with you and follow you, that's more powerful than 100,000 people where 5 of them engage. And this is what's happening on his timeline. And you can tell like there's 20,000 followers, but he's got like 3 likes on a post, So at the end of the day, the priorities are upside down. There's looking successful and then there's being successful, and they are not the same thing. And until people wrap their mind around that, you're going to have nonsense like this happening in the market with both artists who think that they're trying to develop, a following, but they're actually harming themselves in the long run by doing shady shit on the side. So, I just want to point that out. Like if you really want to be successful in a marketplace, you have to be able to build rapport and you have to be able to build relationship. And if you're doing none of those things because your priority isn't necessarily bringing people into your universe, but in looking successful, which is what, follower accounts are, it's just a status symbol. You want to look successful, that's not the same thing. And you're going to lose people like me, who I probably would have bought, tons of pieces from him over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I mean when I say that you can see that from the way people communicate, to you. I mean, when I reach out to artists regarding the artist incubator, like in the very beginning, I'm like a customer, right? Like I want to acquire a piece, and then I keep speaking about like what the collaboration is going to look like. But from the reaction, from the first reaction, I can see, whether things are going to work out or not, and whether that person is having great relationships to her collectors or not, or his collectors or whatever. So yeah, that's quite interesting thing to look at. But let us jump a little bit into the Goodfellas as well. And I announced that I have 2 more artist incubator deals, not signed yet, but agreed on. I'm not sure. Shall I? No, I'm keeping them to myself. But yeah, great artists, women again, both. That's so much I can say that. So yeah, looking forward to have many more artist incubator drops in the future. But for now, the focus, or for January, the focus is on finalizing the core pieces. We have been working on, converting the whole collection to core. We have done that with the 21s, with the artist incubator. And what else? Did we convert anything else? I think that's it, right? So we still got the male collection and the solo rockers to go. And I think this is going to happen by the end of January. Is that correct?
Yeah, the male for sure. Don't know if we'll have soul rockers done, but we'll definitely have, the goal is to have the original IP completed. So that shouldn't be an issue. We'll definitely get that rolling and out, and we'll do it similarly to what we've done in the past. Maybe we can automate a little bit more of it, which would be nice. But since we've got some DGen wallets out there, we probably don't want to do too much of that. We want to make sure the IP goes to where it's going to be honored and collected properly. So, but yeah, month end should be the target.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to have everything finally in core. Did like the process change at all? Like you haven't done that for quite a while, right?
I haven't done it in a while, but the process is similar. The big issue is with the metadata, and in thinking through how the metadata can be used in the future, I've added a lot of fields. And I've added fields that didn't exist in the previous collection. So a lot of the data mapping is really, the data mapping is really where the challenge is, because, you have to make sure that the fields that need to stay blank when you pull the data in. So you have to be really careful about that, especially when you're doing batches, because if one thing is off in the batch, everything behind it will be off. So it's just a matter of being super conscientious about making sure the data gets mapped correctly, and then checking it, rechecking it. And then once the data is done, the minting process is pretty simple. So the data on something like this is really the big challenge. And if you look at the data, you'll notice that on these collections, there's things like, background, outfit, hand traits, eyewear, face cover, this sort of thing. I've basically inserted new metadata between all of those layers so that at some point in the future, if we decide we want to incorporate either like trait building utilities or buying utilities, or even like trait modification utilities, we can do that. So for example, you'll find a layer between, say, background and what would normally be the next layer, which would be like outfit, right? There's a layer between those two. So like if I wanted to put a texture on the background, then maybe I purchase a texture and it sits between the background and the back of the image so that now the background looks different even though it has the same coloration. Same thing with foreground. Like if we want to add another foreground piece or add layers between like hand and body, for example, like there's all these different additive layers that will then permeate both of the male and female collections. And these will be layers that we can then use to, basically modify existing art or add interesting visuals to, or even animations to. So there's a lot of really cool things that it's going to open up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things to come, of course. And besides that, right now or in January, we will focus on revamping the whole website and, trying to lift these kind of things to the next level. And yeah, besides that, of course, we will have many, many, many more spaces this year. We will have the podcast going video finally in hopefully a few weeks. We are waiting for Jason to finalize his setup. And how long is that going to take? Like you want to have like the shiniest background you can get, right?
No, I just need to set my office up for this type of activity. It's not really conducive to video right now because there's no room on my desk for the equipment that I need to position, and B, I want to have just a nicer backdrop other than just a bunch of books. Like right now it's just a ton of books and comics and sort of things like that. So just need to clean it up in there, get some lighting going, because obviously with video, lighting is going to be a big thing. And once that's done, man, we'll be all video all the time.
Yeah, looking forward to that, and appreciating everyone listening to the podcast episode today. Looking forward to see you guys on Spaces on Friday. And any final thoughts from your end?
No, man, I think we pretty much covered it. It's all about valuing the collectors and the IP, and making the situation in Web3 really conducive to what we want to make real. So we pretty much touched on a lot of that stuff. We could probably talk about it a little bit more on Spaces, but you can go super deep with the psychology of collecting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that being said, we wish you guys a very, very great week. We see you guys on Friday, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.